When Neil Armstrong declared, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," he wasn't exaggerating. There were 6 manned Apollo missions that landed on the moon, with a 7th, Apollo 13, famously making an emergency return to Earth without landing. 12 astronauts embarked on these expeditions, each bringing fresh scientific insights into the moon's evolution thanks to the extensive research they undertook. Each mission investigated new sections of the lunar surface and left behind nuclear-powered scientific instruments that continued to send back data to Earth years after the last person left the moon. Nonetheless, Apollo 17 was the final mission of the Apollo program, which concluded in December 1972. So, why did we stop? This video will explore some of the main arguments for why NASA abandoned plans to revisit the moon. Let's get started. NASA's achievement of landing 12 humans on the moon is widely regarded as among the agency's crown jewels. In space, astronauts gathered rocks, photographed them, conducted experiments, placed flags, and eventually returned home. There was never a permanent human settlement built on the moon throughout the Apollo program's missions. Now, half a century after Apollo 17, the last manned mission to the moon landed on the lunar surface in December 1972. There are several compelling arguments for permanently resettling Earth's large, dusty satellite. NASA has vowed that American astronauts will return to the moon by 2025 at the earliest, as part of a program dubbed Artemis. This mission will mark the first time women have set foot on the moon. It's not scientific or technological obstacles, according to former NASA Administrator James Bridenstine, who oversaw the agency during the Trump administration. "If it wasn't for the political risk, we would be on the moon right now," Bridenstine remarked on a phone call with reporters in 2018. "Indeed, we would most likely be on Mars. So, after half a century, why haven't we sent humans back to the moon?" The answer is political dangers involved, which made it impossible. The time and money invested in the initiative were both excessive. Nonetheless, many experts, including former astronauts, claim that mundane and dismal factors prevent new crewed moon trips from happening. The cost of space travel to the moon is high, but it's not insurmountable. The high cost of space travel has long been recognized as a significant barrier to human space exploration. The Biden administration has requested an increase in NASA's budget from the current level of $24 billion for 2022 to roughly $26 billion for 2023. Those numbers may sound like a windfall, but they're actually split among the agency's many divisions and lofty projects, such as the James Webb Space Telescope and the massive rocket project known as Space Launch System, as well as missions to the Sun, Jupiter, Mars, the asteroid belt, the Kuiper belt, and the edge of the solar system. The U.S. military, by contrast, is projected to spend roughly $858 billion in 2023. In addition, NASA has a smaller budget than it did in the past. NASA's share of the federal funding peaked at 4% in 1965. Apollo 7 astronaut Walter Cunningham testified before Congress in 2015. During the last 40 years, it has been less than 1% of the federal budget, and for the last 15 years, it has been trending towards 0.4%. According to a NASA analysis from 2005, it would take around 13 years and $104 billion, or roughly $162 billion today with inflation, to return to the moon. In current currency, the Apollo program would have cost around $142. Manned exploration is the most expensive space venture and, hence, the most difficult to garner political backing, Cunningham testified. A quote from him in Scientific American reads as follows: "Unless the country, which is Congress here, decides to put more money in it, this is just discussion that we're doing here." Cunningham added, "NASA's budget is way too low to do all the things that we've spoken about," referring to Mars missions and a return to the moon. The problem with presidents. Regarding Mars missions and a return to the moon, Cunningham stated, "NASA's budget is far too small to accomplish all we've discussed. If and when NASA returns humans to the moon, potentially in 2025 or later, President Biden may or may not still be in office. Moreover, here's where another serious issue, partisan political whiplash, arises. The time it takes to plan, build, and test a spacecraft that could carry humans to another planet is much longer than a president's term in office. Nonetheless, the space exploration agendas of outgoing presidents and legislatures are frequently abandoned by their successors. But presidents and lawmakers rarely appear concerned with maintaining momentum. The Bush administration, for instance, charged NASA with finding a replacement for the aging space shuttle and a means to revisit the moon in 2004. The Constellation program, which includes the Ares rocket and the Orion spacecraft, was developed by NASA in order to successfully return humans to the moon. For this particular human spaceflight mission, NASA invested $9 billion over the course of 5 years for research, development, design, construction, and testing of the necessary hardware. Nevertheless, after Obama was elected, he sought to cancel Constellation and approve the SLS rocket instead due to the agency's inability to predict costs, as detailed in a Government Accountability Office study. Donald Trump did not cancel SLS, but he shifted Obama's focus from sending humans to an asteroid to sending humans to the moon and Mars instead. Trump had hoped that by 2024, the Artemis spaceship would have returned humans to the moon. Biden appears to be an exception amongst presidents since he hasn't tampered with Trump's Artemis priority for NASA, and he has also left Space Force intact, both of which would have been costly cancellations if they had been made more frequently. Buzz Aldrin testified before Congress in 2015, saying that he thinks the motivation to go back to the moon must originate on Capitol Hill. American leadership is a source of inspiration because it constantly achieves results that no other country has achieved. 45 years ago, we put that theory to the test, although briefly. We haven't done it in a while, if ever, Aldrin declared in writing. According to him, it starts with a bipartisan commitment to sustained leadership in Congress and the administration. The will of the American people, as expressed by voting for politicians, is the true driving force behind the government's promise to return to the moon. Nonetheless, there has never been much enthusiasm for moon missions among the general population. Just 53% of Americans at the height of the Apollo program, when Aldrin and Neil Armstrong set foot on the lunar surface, felt it was worthwhile. Apollo's popularity in the United States has been below 50% throughout the majority of its history. The majority of Americans believe NASA should prioritize a lunar return. More than 57% of Americans in a December 2018 insider study agreed that sending humans back to the moon was a worthy objective for the space agency, but just roughly 38% agreed that we actually need to send real people there. Others who favor a U.S. moon landing argue that robots need not be sent there to conduct exploration. There is more public support for sending humans to Mars now than there was in 2018, when a poll was conducted by the Pew Research Center. Meanwhile, 9 in 10 acknowledge the significance of watching the sky for asteroid threats. The challenges beyond politics. It's not just that there's been a political stalemate over NASA's mandate and funding. To add insult to injury, the moon is also a death trap for mankind that has been in place for the last 4.5 billion years. Landings would be risky due to the numerous craters and large stones that cover its surface. The United States invested what would be billions of dollars today in developing, launching, and delivering satellites to the moon to map its surface and assist mission planners in scouting for suitable Apollo landing sites in the years leading up to the first moon landing in 1969. However, regolith, commonly known as moon dust, is a much more serious issue, as it was formed by meteorite strikes over many years. Several inches deep in some regions, the fine, talc-like top layer of lunar dust is electrostatically charged through interaction with the solar wind and is very abrasive and clingy, fouling up spacesuits, vehicles, and systems very quickly, wrote University of Southern California aeronautical engineer Madhu Thangavalu in 2014. Former astronaut and space travel veteran Peggy Whitston has noted that the Apollo missions had a lot of problems with dust. We need to figure out how to deal with that if we're going to be there for extended periods of time and construct permanent homes, as Whitson put it. A further issue is exposure to daylight. Since the moon has no atmosphere to shield it from the sun, its surface is a scorching hellscape for around 14 days at a time. After tonight, the moon will be one of the coldest places in the cosmos for the following 14 days. Since the lunar darkness can last for weeks, NASA is working on a fission power plant that could provide electricity to astronauts on the moon and other planets like Mars. NASA has developed spacesuits and rovers that can withstand exposure to dust and sunlight, but it's not clear if they're ready for takeoff. A generation of billionaire space nuts may get there. The aging of NASA's staff is another concern. Astronauts warn. More American children than ever before say they want to be famous YouTubers instead of astronauts. Apollo 17 astronaut Harrison Schmitt urged adults to recognize the importance of youth in this kind of work. Mission control for Apollo 13 had an average age of 26 and had gone through many flights before then. Schweikart shared this concern, pointing out that the typical age of a NASA employee at the Johnson Space Center is closer to 60. It is not the source of creative energy. Exciting things happen when you put programs in the hands of people in their teens and 20s. Everyone at SpaceX gets quite excited whenever Elon Musk successfully recovers a rocket booster. According to astronaut Jeffrey Hoffman, Musk is part of a generation of billionaires who are space nuts for his work on a new private suite of rockets capable of reaching the moon. The innovation that's been going on over the last 10 years in spaceflight never would have happened if it was just NASA and Boeing and Lockheed, Hoffman told media during a discussion in 2018, so there was no driving force to either alter procedures or cut costs. Hoffman's innovation comes from the likes of SpaceX, owned by Musk, and Blue Origin, owned by Jeff Bezos. He even added that, "There's no question, if we're going to go farther, especially if we're going to go farther than the moon, we need new transportation. Many astronauts share Bezos' long-term goal of returning to the moon, but for now, we're still in the horse and buggy days of spaceflight, as the saying goes." Bezos has proposed using Blue Origin's soon-to-be-released New Glenn rocket system to launch the first humans to the moon. "We will relocate all heavy industry off of Earth, and the planet will be zoned for residential and light industrial," he announced in April 2018. Musk has also speculated that regular, low-cost trips to the moon will be possible with the help of SpaceX's upcoming Starship launch system. It's possible that SpaceX will beat both NASA and Blue Origin to the moon. In the opinion of astronauts, a return to the moon and a subsequent journey to Mars are both achievable goals. The only question that remains is when. That pretty much wraps this video up, guys. Thanks for watching. So, what are your thoughts about NASA's reluctance to visit the moon? Share with us in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe to this channel with a bell notification if you enjoy watching our content. We upload some awesome stuff here which you will most certainly enjoy. Hit a like on this video and leave a comment below. See you guys in the next one.